Welcome to Feminine Power Time. Turn off the chatter and tune in to what matters. This is the place where we reimagine the way we and the world work from the inside out by marrying together wisdom, well-being, and leadership. My name is Christina Rilo, and I am your host, and I want to welcome you into another segment of our Genuine Power series. In this one, episode number 263 is entitled Wise Eyes Are Watching. Wise Eyes Are Watching. For those of you who will remember the 1980s band Hall & Oates, I think that's who sang it. I think I should break out into Private Eyes Are Watching You. But alas, I may have a good podcasting voice. I do not have a good singing voice. And it's okay. We can't be good at all things. It's good to know where your genius lies, which we'll talk about in this podcast series on Genuine Power soon. But for today, we're going to dive into the power of intuition and insight. Intuition and insight. Intuition and insight are half of the equation for what I call full spectrum intelligence. And in our world, when we think of intelligence, often we only think of the intellect. Because as it turns out, the intellect is the logical, rational, masculine principle. And again, we love the masculine. It's not about women. It's not about men. It's about the energies of the masculine and the feminine, and also the physical world and the spiritual world, or I like to think of it as the material world and the mystical world. So if you were to imagine in your mind's eye, almost like a weather vane or a compass with 4 points, there's a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. We have feminine power on the left, and we have masculine power on the right, and they are what we like to call here a power spectrum or a power continuum. And you can get off that power continuum and get into imbalances where only one side of that spectrum or continuum is really valued inside of a society, a company, ourselves, an organization, a team. And then things get off kilter, which is our current world. We talk about all the time here. We've been talking about for 9 years. We live in a society and a culture, and therefore all the systems, including our own internal systems, have overvalued the masculine and undervalued the feminine. And then we come up with distortions. There's also another axis of distortion that has been operating for quite some time. I don't know exactly. We like to say around 2,000 to 5,000 years, but who knows? Could be longer. When you're talking of thousands of years, who really cares? But a long time. And that vertical axis is the material world in the south and the mystical world in the north. And sometimes people will call it the physical world and the spiritual world. But I feel like the material and the mystical can really help us kind of get out of any weirdness. Like people get weird about masculine and feminine, and people get weird about spirit and physical because they think it means religion. So if we go like mystical material, which is another power spectrum that we work in co-creation, what that is the visible and the invisible. The physical, visible, we can see it. The mystical, the invisible, we can't see it. But it's very, very powerful. And that's a lot of what we're seeing right now. Like you might be asking yourself, like, how did that happen? How did that person, cut their gazillion billion dollars of wealth in half because, I don't know, they got divorced, for example, not naming names, but just saying, and then recreated that money in like 2 to 5 years, doubled it back to bazillions of dollars. There is mystical, magical stuff going on for sure, stuff on the invisible realms. And there's a wisdom teaching that says that lots of people, we all actually have levels of access to the mystical information and the mystical wisdom. The physical is easy, right? We can all see it. But if you're only operating in the physical realm, all you see is what you can see and feel with your 5 senses. The mystical realm actually requires that you have connection to your intuition so you can access higher realms of wisdom so that you can then marry it up with your intellect and also receive insight, higher level insight. I have to call it divine insight, but it's just insight. It's kind of like the insights that Einstein might have had or anybody has. That sometimes they're called epiphanies. And And you can use that, the wisdom teaching is you can use that insight, that access to the mystical, the access to the invisible. Like, how did the Egyptians make pyramids, right? Or how did the Mayan people, they built these very elaborate systems and then they just kind of disappeared. Like, what's up with that? And so there are things that defy physical reality. They're only explainable in the mystical realms. But the thing is that this is power we're talking about. So intuition and intellect are power. Access to the mystical and the material using insight and instinct is power. But you can't see it because power isn't visible. And so people who have access to the higher mystical, and by higher, I mean things we cannot see on the physical realm, not necessarily better, but like superpowers. They can use it for good to help free people, or we can use it for selfish, greedy, self-serving, destructive reasons to control people. And Star Wars, not so far off, y'all. Lots of science fiction, not so far off. And that's part of what, if you had your wise eyes watching, that's part of what you would have been seeing for decades unfolding. And now it's just so clear on so many levels of what happens when people with self-serving intentions are put into places of power. But you know what? They've been there for 2,000, 5,000 something years. It's just now, it's really like we can't not turn away from it. But for those of us who have been watching this happen through our wise eyes, there's a surprise to it, but there's a level of, well, that makes sense. That's what's going down. And because we have access to our wise eyes, and this is why we're going to dive into this today, is we can find a place of stability and regulation within the dismantling, deconstruction that has been going on for quite some time, but has sped up for many reasons that we've already gone into in many podcasts before this. And so whether you're a person who's like, I've been working with my intuition and insight for decades, or you're like, I know about intuition and I know I have it, but I'm not really familiar with it, or you're anywhere in between all of that, what I want to invite us all into is a place of curiosity, because as Alice Walker's book, Hard Times Require Furious Dancing, intense times require deepening your practices that allow the intuition and insight to emerge, and the practices that stabilize your intuition and your intellect in wholeness. And that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to just say that once again, because I'm going to slow us down and take a breath here and really hear what I'm saying. Why we're here today is that intense, changing, evolutionary, shifting times, and that's where we're at, require us to deepen our practice in being able to access our intuition and the insight that comes from the imaginal field and the higher field and the divine field, to access it, to hear it, to translate it, to decipher it, and then to be able to allow our instincts and our intellect to come from wholeness and not the wound. Make sense? It's okay. We're going to deepen into it. So I want to just be clear. So just take a moment and let's take a couple breaths together, because one of the things that's true about intuition and insight, and remember, intuition would be the feminine power, the intellect would be the masculine power on the horizontal line of the what I call the four eyes of wisdom. or the wise eyes are watching. So I'm gonna kind of share that model with you. It's a model I created to help understand the full spectrum of experience of intelligence that we need. And then we're going to tune into why this matters, and I'll share with you also a model I created today. It's called the six channels of intuition to help get clearer on what are your strongest channels and which are the ones you can really lean into, and what are they saying to you at this time. And then what are the practices, dear one, that you're like that you can start to lean into even more in these times so that your guidance is clear, your internal peace and system can maintain regulation, and you can follow your particular path that you are here to live. There is no going back. We're all moving forward together. And like I've said a gazillion times, we're in this triangle of transformation of letting go and releasing the past and healing, stabilizing in the now and preserving in the now and leading and creating the new. It's a lot of things. And so we need all four of these pieces and these eyes, really. We call it the four eyes model. One of the women in one of my Elevate Leadership Councils named it the four eyes. And so think of it like four eyes, I, and I. And it's intellect, what's instinct, intuition, insight, and intellect. Okay, but we have to slow down and breathe. And as you're breathing, you take your first breath into your belly and just allow your belly to soften. We cannot receive intuition and insight if our belly is hardened and we're constrained in our belly and our solar plexus and our shoulder blades. So just allowing through your breath for that belly, and then your solar plexus, and then your shoulder blades soften to relax. You can even breathe softly out of your mouth just to hear your own breath, like you're just releasing pressure. And then take a breath into your heart. That was your body. Let's breathe into your heart. And just breathing into your heart and really intending and feel the energy and color of magenta and lavender. Magenta is the color of the capacity to create between the material and the mystical realms. It's the full color of the chakra energy systems from purple to red. It's the color of co-creation. And lavender is the color of compassion, self-compassion, kind of compassion that is past our human understanding. Talked about last podcast. Just let that color of magenta and lavender just fill your heart. You might even want to open your chest a little just to open up that heart energy. That's why we do yoga and stretching. When our heart is constricted or it's full of fear, we respond from the wound. And our intuition and our insight can get off kilter. Some people who have been working with intuition many years, the best of us can get, if our heart is twizzled up and our bodies are contracted and the belly and the solar plexus, if our belly is contracted, we can't allow the imagination to come in. The solar plexus is connected. We're moving from our will versus moving in flow with the higher will, with the will that I would call it the harmonic will. The universe is always working towards a harmonic order, and we as life are always unfolding. Solar plexus has to be open to allow that to happen. And then at a heart level, as you're tuning in here, the thing is, we have these instincts, important part of our intelligence, and we have an intellect, important part of our intelligence. In our intuition as well, also important part of our intelligence. If our heart is operating from what I call the love cracks, the wounds, all of those things, including insight that comes from, I call it divine. For me, it's divine insight. It just drops in, or insight from grace. You can decide where you feel like it comes from, but it can get clouded and it can get distorted. And our intuition can get distorted, and our instincts, like, oh, I just had this gut, but like really it's coming from the wound, or the insight is coming from the wound. And then our actions and our creations can be the worst, is monstrous, that can really harm people and to also harm ourselves. Just think of any decision you've ever made from the wound. Like you fiercely thought, I should marry this person, for example, or I should take this job, and you bypassed because you were coming from that wound or your will. And then lastly, is take a breath into your mind. And just imagine again that color of lavender, and this time also bring in the color of blue. So it's like a sapphire blue and a lavender that's just clearing your mind like a waterfall. And I'm taking you through this meditation right now so that you can be open to receiving what will come through in this conversation, this episode. I feel like these genuine power episodes are like transmissions for us at this time. So just let that wash down the top of your head and your mind, and let it cleanse your positive mind, which can be overly optimistic. Cleanse your negative mind, which can get stuck in the ick, and depending on how your negative mind works, make you defensive, make you skeptical, lots of things depending on how your negative mind works. And then just also rinsing off your neutral mind. And you can, even as you're breathing and just feeling that waterfall come, just even tune into your mind like, oh, like neutral's in the middle, and then you have a positive mind on the left and a negative mind on the right. And just either of those out of balance, just like the masculine and feminine, can be destructive. So we want to come back to that neutral mind. So letting that compassion, and then blue, sapphire blue, is the color of clarity and intuition and stillness, like that still water. Just letting any thoughts or worries of the future just wash away, and any goop from the past just wash away, and just saying to yourself, be here now. I am here now. And now I invite you to breathe into all four, really, of those places. Breathe into your belly, your solar plexus, heart, and that place, call it your third eye. You can touch right in between your eyebrows, pituitary gland, and also just touch where that soft spot would be. And just do a little spiral there. That's where your pineal gland is, sometimes called the gateway to consciousness. And just breathing into, that's called your center channel, or in yogic science, it's called your Sushumna. It actually has a name. And just breathing into it like an instrument, and just attuning yourself to whatever feels right for you. To light, calm, to peace, to just be here now as an exploration of how can I tune more deeply into my own intuition? How can I open those wise eyes to see more and receive more insight and guidance? How can I attune and balance my instincts and my intellect to neutrality? That being too negative and too in fear, or too positive and too optimistic, but balanced. And so just seeing in your mind's eye, as we just get this last piece in, I want you to see this glyph is a compass. Within the middle of that compass is intuition, or is wisdom. And that is what we're after. That is wisdom in our full spectrum of intelligence. In the south is your instincts. In the west is your intuition. In the north is your instinct. And in the east is your intellect. This is a model I created called the 4 Eyes. I'm happy to share it with you here, and I also do teach this as well in my leadership work, in my decision-making work, and sharing it with you just so you can see it here as a frame of like when you're able to, again, instinct and wholeness, sometimes called the gut feeling, intuition, feeling, sensing, water, still, calm, in the wholeness of the feminine, instinct, spirit, mystical, air, opening for that insight and epiphany to come in, guidance. These are all guidance, and then intellect in the east. The logical, the rational, the masculine, and that would be thought, like air and wind. And then those all come together. The intellect's always last, because then the intellect is informed by a wholeness, instinct, intuition, and insight. And then the intellect can be formed by wholeness. And that brings us into wisdom. So we'll end there today. But I want to give you some pieces around understanding and bringing language to the power of intuition and insight. But as we do that, take a moment and think about where you're at in your own threshold shifting right now, and how intuition and insight, the power of intuition and insight, the power of being able to work with intuition and intellect together, that power of accessing the material and the mystical, the power of your wise eyes watching and seeing at a higher, more refined level than you can currently see now, so that you can see what's actually happening at multiple layers instead of at the level of the way that your senses are currently working. And again, all of us get to come in and say, yes, I am willing to open up what is called in feminine wisdom, my sight more, the capital S. Help me help those wise eyes see what I can't see. Just think about in your own life how there's been times when you were blind to things. You were deaf to things. You didn't want to know the truth. You didn't want to see. You shut that shit down, as I like to say, because to see feels like harder, right? Because if I open up those senses and I really allow myself to see, I'm going to have to do something about it. I'm going to have to take responsibility. I'm going to have to go inside and heal some of those wounds that are causing the distortions within myself. I'm going to have to do something. But the truth is that if you keep hanging up the phone or you keep dialing down the volume on your intuition and your insight and those senses, which as we evolve, they continue to refine, they continue to get higher. I don't think we're ever done evolving in them. And we certainly need them more than ever. It's like going on an adventure blind and deaf, which some people do, but if you don't have to, why would you choose that? Or going on an adventure and your glasses are all full of grease and you can't see and you're relying on someone else to guide you. I mean, let's just be real here for a minute around, okay, here comes the fierce feminine. Let's be real about intuition and insight and why, and the mystical, and why it's been poo-pooed and shoo-shooed and woo-wooed and taboo-ooed for so long, or it's been downgraded into a 6-minute video that's like, intuition, yay! And it's like not grounded at all, or it gets stuck into I gotta make it serious to fit into the business world, and we have to back it all up. Something like, evidence-based blah-de-blah on intuition and da-da-da, and is like, oh my God, I'm like in a science class being lectured to about intuition. Like, intuition is the feminine. You can't put it into a frickin' box or like measure it on some T-score. Like, it's part of the mystery. And yes, there are models and there are practices, and we're going to talk about those here, and you need to know how to work with it, and you need to know how to know when you're in your bias and or your wound versus it actually being true intuition. But like it was just so indicative of what happens when people try to take the feminine and the mystical and fit it into the box of consumerism, and or like I just call it like the gray world versus the colorful world. And it was just so mundane. It's just so mundane. And like intuition and the feminine, she's wild. Like she's like a horse, she wants to, you gotta let her run. And insight, like it's such a high frequency. You can't just stick it into a meme or to a little, slide and be, this is how insight works. Because it's something that has to come alive within us. It's something that has to awaken within us. It's a relationship that we have to the deeper wisdom of this earth, of our own biosystem, of whatever you want to call it, grace, the divine, God, spirit, I don't care, soul. Part of the reason why we are where we are as a culture is because we have denied that soul, or we've tried to take the things that are the feminine and then frickin' enslave it and make it be about productivity instead of being like, this is like creativity. I don't quite know how this works. Like, I can't tell you the A, B, C, D. I can give you some models, I can give you some practices, but I know it when I feel it. And did you ever wonder why it's acceptable for a woman or a man or a person to say, I have a gut feeling or a gut instinct? But if you're in a boardroom or a business meeting or wherever you are, and you're saying, well, my intuition is telling me. My overview pattern, which is one of the 6 intuition, sees this. I have a sense that. I had an insight when I was in the shower. I don't really know where it came from. It just kind of was like an epiphany. And then depending on, maybe you get to be with and work with really amazing people who lean in and are like, tell me more. But I can't tell you the number of people, and especially women, who have had to couch, prove, back up their intuitive knowing because it didn't fit into the measurable intellect, or it wasn't a gut instinct. And that time has to be over. We have to stop hiding our intuition. We have to stop not using the word intuition. We have to stop overvaluing the intellect. And why are we talking about guts? That's what I want to know. I'm like, I don't think any woman wants a gut. I don't think most men, I don't think any human wants a gut. So why can't we talk about our belly center? I mean, you can if you're like, in yoga class, we'll talk about the belly center. But what if we shifted the language from gut to belly? Oh my gosh, maybe we'd all stop feeling like we had to have the flattest abs ever. Hard abs, hard core versus strong core, soft belly. That's what we actually need. Strong core, soft belly. So as you start to open up just watch your eyes. I mean, I remember going to Pilates back in Sonoma, and they had these words that said hardcore on the wall. And I asked them if they would change the word hard to strong, because every time I looked in it, it just like every feminine sensibility in me wanted to run off of my reformer screaming. Because I'm like, we don't need to be programmed with hard. And then we get the dynamic of, well, there's hard skills and soft skills. And that also is base level thinking, because we're talking about is more nuanced than that. And then usually the soft skills get pattered away when really what we're talking about is the feminine and the masculine, the material and the mystical, the heart and the head, the body and the soul. And so we got to expand our vocabulary here. Thanks for playing with me while I know I had a little fierce grace feminine rant. You just never know how she's going to come through. She tells me the topic, and then it comes through. But it's important to have this fierceness, because if you think about it for a moment and open up your wise eyes and look around and observe, there's a reason we don't learn about intuition in grade school, in high school. I mean, I've even talked to young women who've graduated from some of the best colleges in America that are like women-based colleges, like traditionally like the Seven Sisters, and asked them, have you had a class in intuition, knowing how your intuition works? Do you have decision-making classes that teach you the difference between your instincts and your intuition? And they just looked at me like, what are you talking about? No. And they went to the best high schools, and this is that's on purpose, you all. That's on purpose. That's on purpose that the public education system and even the private one isn't teaching us that, because if we knew how to actually wield our intuitive power and trust it, and our instinctual power came from wholeness, and our insight, we really knew how to decipher and discern, we would never fall for the malarkey. We would, when's the last time you heard the word malarkey? You know I love the word Michigas, use it all the time, but it's malarkey. We wouldn't fall for it. We wouldn't make choices that diminish our light, that turn off our genius. I was just talking to a good friend today who's in his 70s, and we were talking about these life cycles that we go through as humans, where we have like an awakening. It's called your Saturn return, but between the ages of 27, 26, and 33. And there's another one in your 50s and another one after that. And just depending how people miss their doors opening, there's these portals that open for us. And then we get scared. And it's like, oh, the intellect, it's not rational. It's not logical. I should just do the safe thing. I should just do the sure thing. And I always say, don't be a dummy pants, for sure. But also, you got to get out of those five senses and really develop and trust our intuition, our instincts, and our insight, and when those come from wholeness instead of the wound. And so what we're talking about here is not just like some nice podcast on this nice power. This is how we were programmed to be when we are in our full human power, to create a world rooted in wisdom and love and all of the things, the more beautiful world that we can all see. And so where do we start? We start with ourselves, and we start with the people we have influence over. Our kids, our grandkids, our friends, but we start first on the inside. And one thing I also want to just say that's important piece here is that one of the other important reasons the inner wisdom is so important. So the inner wisdom, it tunes into all of these: instinct, intuition, insight, and then the intellect comes in too. So the inner wisdom is all of these working together as well. Just the feminine is leading, and the body and the spirit is leading, and then the mind gets to come along. But the inner wisdom can't fully go online unless the inner critic, so the parts of ourselves that put pressure on ourselves, that judge ourselves, that blame, criticize, what I like to call the inner mean girl and the inner mean guy here, those parts that cause us to make choices that are not in alignment with our highest good, and therefore don't open us up to be the forces of grace and goodness and imagine what's possible. The inner critic just shuts that shit down because it's a scaries. And what we learned I'm being a 5-year-old on purpose. What we learned in our research, Amy Ehlers and I, who is the co-author of the Reform Your Inner Mean Girl book, which is going to have its 10-year anniversary in April, which is exciting. What we learned is that the inner critic will not. And we call it the inner mean girl and the inner mean guy because it's not just critical. It motivates us through fear and pressure and shame and blame and all those deeper emotions. So it may not show up critical, but it will sabotage you. So, some people call it the saboteur. But the reason we call it the like inner mean girl or the inner mean guy, or for kids, when we do work with kids, we call it the inner meanie, is because it is mean. Sometimes it's mean with a smile, but it is that like that bully that stops you from trusting yourself and from empowering yourself. There's a lot of people feeling disempowered right now and a lot of mistrust going on. So what we learned is that part of us will not let go of its job until it can trust your inner wisdom. And your inner wisdom has to have access to all four of those types of intelligence: instinct, intuition, insight, and intellect. Can you imagine imagine with me for a moment, in which you and I had learned all these things when we were 6 and 5. That's when the inner mean girl and the inner critic starts. Even beforehand would be better, but that's what we also learned in our research. It kind of goes online as early as 6 for most people. Imagine a world in which you asked a college student to tell you the difference between instinct and intuition, and they could, to tell you what kind of channels of intuition that really worked well for them, to tell you about their practices, and that they were using that to guide their decisions, so that they could make decisions not from scarcity and fear, but from wholeness and alignment with their own genius. And I'm going to say one more thing about this, and then we'll go into the channels, the 6 channels so you can kind of tune in for you on like where are your strongest and where are your weakest. And then we'll tune into some of the practices we can each use to go into this more and do our practices so that we can stay stabilized and regularized and tuned in. And then I'll lead you through a little meditation. How does that sound? But I want to share an actual a piece here that I've been thinking about sharing with you all for some time, but I haven't shared it. And so it's time. Take a breath. So when I talk about, and I'm sharing with you all these wise eyes, what I'm suggesting to all of us and what has been my experience is that as you open up your channels of intuition, of which there are 6 major ones, which I'm going to tell you in a moment, share with you in a moment, and then you transform the wounds into wholeness. So your instincts, your body instincts, are more attuned to insight. So you open up to that higher consciousness coming tuned in. You're tuned into the higher consciousness and you're guided. You receive guidance, clear guidance. And your intellect is then also, because you've done the work with knowing your mind and training your mind to come from the neutral mind and worked out, whether they're samskaras, is what they would say in yoga, whether we call them imprints, or the traumas that are in your body, and you are able to be that attuned instrument, you start to see things. And over time, your sight opens more and more and more and more. And so you can start to see the things that the Darth Vaders of the world, those using mystical powers to control and take away freedoms, you see them and you don't get entranced by them. And it gives you wisdom and knowledge on how to best focus your life force and how to best play what I like to call wizard chess. Or, it's like I always say to my fierce female clients who have an advocate heart that might be working inside of a system, I always say to them, this is not the Joan of Arc lifetime. Do not get your sword and charge onto the battlefield into battling with powerarchy. That will exhaust you. We need to pull back, and this is what we do, why I call this podcast Wise Eyes Watching. We need to pull back, the wise ones do, and look at the field and observe and watch through all of our senses and all of the different levels of intelligence. Then we start to see where what I call the Jedi points are. So think of Jedi points. For those of you who've seen the first Star Wars, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those of you that haven't, it's good to watch. It's very indicative for this time. But what Jedi points are is there's a point where to blow up the Death Star, they actually just need to go in and hit one point. And if they hit that one point, the whole thing goes kabowie. So instead of running around the Death Star trying to kill all the stormtroopers and get to the Sith and all of that, that is the one thing that they need to do, which they end up doing in the movie. So we have those things in our own lives. And for some of us, that is our work in the world from a system perspective. We do it in our organizations. We do it in our family systems. And I'm not saying you should go blow up your organization and you want to go blow up your family system, or you want to, what I'm saying is we take a step back and we see it's almost like, there are some the bigger systems we do want to shift. So like for me, when I look at the powerarchy and I get mad about all of the things I've just said and so many more, I'm like, okay, if I try to go directly at that thing and the people who are at the top doing whatever mishigash, malarkey, top of the pyramid, because that is the shape of the current dynamic. So that pyramid, if I try to go right at that, like forget about it. I'll just be Joan of Arc and not that she didn't do good work in the world, she probably did, but it's like I don't want to die on the battlefield. I actually want to do something that directs my life force in a way that's planting the seeds of wisdom that will go on way after I am no longer here. And so that is why I'm very clear on my part is to train and guide like a Jedi, the emerging and established leaders of this new era, whether they're 8 years old or they're 88 years old, just it's not necessarily about age, but it is that full gamut. And I know that's my part. And so, but I have the ability to see that and see, like, if we start educating people now that are already in positions of power and authority and position, as well as start training and giving access to those 8-year-olds so they don't forget who they are and they know who they are, which means they'll know their part and they have the practices to stay harmonized. And then why I teach all the practices and why I do the workshops on well-being and staying harmonized within organizations and systems and gather the women, all the things that I do is to actually help that integration that I just led you through at the beginning happen. Because if we're integrated belly, or we're open belly and aligned belly and heart and our center channel and all the self-love work is about returning the heart to wholeness so that we can operate from wholeness instead of the wound. That's all intentional, you all. Because that, and I'm offering that to you as a way to pull back in your life. And whether that's your work in the world and the impact and the influence you want to have, which all of us we want to know that. And that's why we're going to do the piece on genius coming soon to a podcast, this one near you, with a guest wise woman, Gina Murata, who spent a lot of time and energy really deepening in genius. Because it's we're never oh, I know my genius, I'm done. It's but if we know our part, it's it's a big piece of this. And then I just do my part, but it's bigger than this bigger part. And I see how that can have an impact because for me, because for me, I know if I can support this age range of emerging and established leaders from 8 to 88, to be whole within, for those 8-year-olds to not lose connection to their intuition so that when they're at a Seven Sisters college or one of the top colleges, or even they're in any college or public high school or whatever, you're oh yeah, I totally know how to use my intuition. I got that training. I've been practicing, it's they are tuned in and they can tell the mishigash. So they don't go procreate with the powerarchy. I said that. They don't procreate with the powerarchy. So that means they don't have children with the powerarchy. And it means that they don't go work for the powerarchy and give their life force and their energy to systems that are sucking the life force out of our home called Earth that we all live on, and sucking the souls and our energy out to just be this, we're just feeding, my wise woman eyes sees how social media, one thing, it has many good things, but it also sucks people's life force, because people who are amazing healers and teachers and artists are a little bit different because they can put their way Instagram was supposed to work was to be able to see pictures. So there's good stuff there, but it also can be like a vortex of an energy suck for just like posting. And the thing is that like energy that wants to destroy, it needs our fear. It needs our anxiety. It needs our frustration. It needs us fighting with each other. That's how the powerarchy survives. Whatever it is, call it the patriarchy, call it the powerarchy. I don't like to call it the patriarchy because I do not think it's just about men, and it's hard to separate that from what's happening. I actually think that there's a much darker thing going on around there that is not my business, and I don't want to look at it. All I want to do is help all of it calm down and feel love and know love and transform in love. Think of it like Gulliver's Travels, like the big giant goes to the Lilliputian land and rah, 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 dumb, big, and then the Lilliputians tie him down. But instead of tying down whatever that is, it's like it gets wrapped in love. Mother love, self-love, sistership love, brothership love. Like love does heal. And we have to remember that as we go through this together, you all. That's our way through. It has always been our way through. It is the only way through. I think of the people and the things that happened in the 60s, and Martin Luther King Jr. has been like, I don't know if I'm following him or he's following me, I'm not sure, but he's just showing up all over. He's also innate on the Enneagram, so they say. And he inspires me, and his words around peace and leadership. And so it's like so many people have stood for love for thousands of years. So many people have stood for wisdom, have died for wisdom to keep it alive, to not just go over to the dark side, literally, and capitulate and conform and give their life force to the powerarchy. They've said, no, I'd rather die. Now, I don't want any of us to have to die for that. That's not this lifetime, you all, right? Not Joan of Arc lifetime, not Joan of Arc, not here to be martyrs. Not here to be a martyr either in killing yourself silently by working yourself to death. When I look around, especially the people who have a mission or a purpose, I'm very passionate about working with groups and teams around that, because we cannot keep capitulating the burnout model there. And it's the martyr, it's the distorted feminine. That's not working, that is not going to work either. That's part of the whole messed upness of the model. More on that later. But coming back to you and me here right now. What is it that your wise eyes are seeing? You take a step back and you look at what's happening from that place of the watcher. And whether it's in your organization, team, family, this world, your own life, when you pull back and can be the observer and tune into your instincts, tune into your intuition, open to insight, and then let the intellect come around, you will A, make wiser choices, B, you will feel more centered, and C, you will be able to help and support more people without burning yourself out. Now, the last thing I'll say about this, and then I'll share the 6 channels, is that, is this. Our wise eyes can, as I was saying, get blocked with like goop on our eyes. We can't see it. We have the wounding, whatever. And several years ago, I did a wisdom quest I led a wisdom quest with a bunch of people. And it was after the 2016 elections in the United States. And my question was, how can people vote for, put into positions of power, be it political office or government office or corporate office, or doesn't matter, just put people and go along with, really, it's more even going along with things that are like not supportive of what it is they actually believe in, and not supportive of life, and not supportive of women and children. in the indigenous wisdom tradition, as I understand it through my teachers, one of the primary teaching is no to a society that is healthy, no harm to women and children. Period. Doesn't mean the men get harmed, but it's a moniker of whether a system is healthy. And another one is that we're considering our impact now on 7 generations forward is another moniker versus really just looking at short-term gains. Looking at the longer game. So our society isn't there yet. So when I was asking this question, the insight that came through, I was painting, and that's one of the tools. We'll hopefully have a chance to do a Genuine Power episode on imagination, because we are in a crisis of imagination, not knowing how to connect with it and work with it. So I was painting, and the response that came was the power. It was called the patriarchal parasite, or what I would call the powerarchy parasite, and that was the answer. Like, we're not seeing clearly. And it was interesting because a couple of weeks before that, I had gone to a TEDx talk in Sonoma, and I didn't even know why I was at the TEDx talk. But again, following my intuition, following the guidance, this is how synchronicity works. I'm there, and this was about 2 months, 6 weeks before the Vision Quest and the election. And there was 2 people who got up to speak. One talked about, he was a parasitologist, and he talked about parasites, that these particular kinds of parasites that he had studied that get into a fish's brain, and they put a film over the fish's brain so that the fish starts to act unnatural. The parasite, in order to go to maturity, has to be eaten by a heron. So if the fish doesn't get eaten by a heron, the parasite dies. So the parasite that's been living in the fish's body puts this film over its brain and then starts doing things to make itself more attractive to the heron, so that the heron will eat the fish. Fish dies, parasite lives. So the fish has no idea this is going on, because the fish doesn't know it has a parasite. So its instincts are off, and it's doing things that are like not in alignment with its instincts. It's not using its intuition. It's for sure not being guided, and it's not operating in its own best interest for survival. So it dies, parasite lives, and off it goes and grows to full maturity. And then the second woman that got up, she had all these letters after her name, and she had done all these studies around attraction and political affiliation, and just they had done all these like studies with it. There was like voices and smells and this attraction thing that happens. And then as I was painting and knowing what I know about self-love and the wounds of the hearts and how we make choices in our lives, and we stuff our love cracks. I call it stuffing our love cracks, where the fear and the shame and all the things live that are blind to us, until we go in there and we pull out the things that are holding all that stuff back, and we heal. And that's where the patriarchal parasite came from, and or what I now call the powerarchal parasite. And we've all had that. I mean, think of a time in your life where you acted not in alignment with yourself, that you were blind to what you didn't want to see, what you couldn't see. And maybe it wasn't particularly the patriarchal parasite, but it was definitely something within you that didn't want to have to open up and look at those deeper wounds, those deeper places, those deeper things. And we're just experiencing that now at such a deep level that the only thing that we can do, you all, is observe and tune in and use our wise eyes and use all of our centers of intelligence, of instinct and intuition and insight and intellect together to know what our part is, to show up where we're meant to go, to not waste our energy where it's not meant to go, and to tune into these channels of intuition and do the practices that are going to support us as we go forward. So that's where we're going to end here today. I'm going to share with you the 6 channels, share with you a couple practices to think about, and then wrap us up all in a warm bow, or what I like to call a sapphire blue blanket. And I just want to say for one moment, I'm just so grateful to be here with you all. didn't know what was going to come through. I was talking to Noah before the podcast, and he said, "What's wrong with you? You're all goobered up." he's like, "You're just like," and I was like totally in my head. And I've been sitting with this podcast in this conversation and talking with you all about intuition and insight for some time. And it's the foundation of the feminine wisdom way. It's the foundation of everything I do and teach, partly. And there are things, like I said, like I've never spoken that part out loud around the patriarchal parasite, because I don't want anyone that's listening right now to ever feel like I'm pointing a finger or blaming you or saying you're doing something wrong. I almost married somebody and gave up my true life design because of the patriarchal parasite. And I didn't know I had it. Mine was connected deeply into the vision of success that made me think I was happy because I was on that track. So I was bought into that. And it wasn't like I was giving my energy away I had many epiphanies where I realized, oh my God, I'm giving my life force away to things that are killing people, that are toxic to people, that are like questionable food products, that are working in an industry that is pretty distorted. And so I've moved, that's part of my piece, but I also had, a very dominating father and a very dominating fiance and a love cracks that had deep abandonment stuff in there. And I didn't freaking want to look at that shit. It's like I was doing everything I could avoid my intuition, who was calling me up on the phone, and I was having dreams, and I knew, my knowing channel knew that I wasn't supposed to marry this person, but I just overrode it with my willpower. And my dreams, my visual channel was having dreams where I would see myself with this like guy, and I was at my cottage with a boat, and who turned out to be where I met Noah, my current husband. And I was like, turn that shit off. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. And so our channels are always communicating to us. We always say in when I'm teaching intuition in the feminine wisdom way, you have to recognize the intuition and insight is coming through. You have to receive it, like pick up the phone and say, yes, I'm listening. And then you got to respond and take action. And those pieces, recognize, receive, and respond, they're hard because it does require us, like we talked at the beginning, to actually look into deeper things inside of ourselves, or make changes that can feel scary, or have conversations that can feel hard. But that's where we're all at right now. And so I invite you to write those down: recognize, respond, recognize, receive, and respond. And maybe it's not as dramatic for you right now. Maybe it is. I know a lot of people are having some pretty dramatic things happening. Maybe it's more subtle for you. For me, it's more subtle right now too, and not just going back to the way I've always done things in my career and my job and things, and just more than I'm going to get into today. But it's like I got to keep moving towards what I know I want, while also stabilizing in the now. And your intuition can really help that. So here are the 6 channels. Number 1 is audio. You hear things come to you as like in messages. It's almost, to me, feels like you're having a conversation with the universe. So it comes through auditorily. 2 is verbal. And verbal is where you, two is feeling, the feeling channel. So the feeling channel is where you receive and feel information through your emotional body. So for those of you who might think, oh, I'm an empath, I'm empathic, I can feel things. You're feeling it emotionally. I always say this is like a swimming pool where it's like water is emotion. You could walk into a room, you can feel people's emotions. So why are people feeling so angry? What's going on? And feeling is such a great tool, but it's like you can just fall into the pool, and all of a sudden you're just taking on everyone's emotions. But it's a perception of feeling other people's emotions or feeling the room. Kinesthetic channel is where you sense and feel things through your body, and you get information through your physical body and your energetic body. So you might have the truth chills when someone speaks the truth, or you have like a distinct bodily reaction, which is like your body's way of getting your attention. Could be like your stomach being in knots, or just just having this, like I notice, like for me, it's like when I do yoga, I get a lot of downloads when I'm doing breath work and pranayama, and Amy, my co-author in Reform Your Inner Mean Girl, she would go jogging and get lots of downloads, and lots of insights would come in and intuitive hits. And so she was moving her body. So that happens a lot for people who are kinesthetic. The fourth channel is knowing. This is one of the hardest channels because you know, but you don't know why you know, but you have a sense that what you know is true. And so the information just comes to you. You just have the sense of deep knowing, even though you have no outside proof or any mental reason why. And it's hard because you can't back it up. And this is my weakest channel. And I surround myself with knowers because my timing belt tends to be a little bit off, and knowers are really grounded people usually, and they have a really good sense. Their instinct and their intuition work together to tune in to right timing. So it's good as you look at these different channels to surround yourself, to know where you're strong, and to surround yourself with people who have different intuitions than you. I'm married to a knower. We talked about auditory. The next one is visual, and this is where you see things on the inner and outer planes. So it's not like seeing walking ghosts on a TV screen, although for some that's possible. It often shows up like seeing pictures or movies play in your mind, or images or symbols popping up in your field of vision. People who have a strong vision intuition love metaphors that kind of paint vivid pictures. They easily sprout up for you. You might daydream or have vivid night dreams, or when you meditate or slow down, you receive images or stories. Or you might see things like pop out through the day, like maybe you're walking past your table and you see your sweater and it kind of goes bing, bing, zing, zing, and then you think, oh, I should grab that. That's your intuition with your intellect working in your favor, because your intuition knows it's going to be cold, but then your intellect overrides your intuition and says, well, it's okay, I don't need to carry it. And then at the end of the day, you're freezing because you didn't listen to your intuition. That is a very practical example how that works. And then last one is the overview channel, which we've kind of been talking a lot about. And I would really encourage you to play with as you take your wise eyes out to really stand in this place of watcher. The overview channel is where you see the patterns, you see the larger picture, and you can kind of see how everything seems to fit together. Kind of like what happened with me with the powerarchy or the patriarchal parasite. But then I saw that, and then I just started to see more about how the systems were structured and how things were working together and where these Jedi points were. So it starts to open up more and more and more. And you just see the connection between the things. So the connection, by being able to see the connection, which is why I'm always talking about patterns here, is then you can see the pattern. And in the ability to see the pattern and the connections, it opens up wisdom that you can't see without seeing the pattern or without seeing the connections. Just love the overview channel. So again, you have the feeling channel, the emotional feeling channel, the kinesthetic channel, the hold on a second, I gotta have him here. We have a book, it's called The Feminine Wisdom Way. It's the book we use in Feminine Wisdom Way, and so I'm reading from the book here. Okay, feeling channel, kinesthetic channel, knowing channel, auditory channel, visual channel, and overview channel. Those are the 6. So you could write those down. I should put those up. I'll make a blog post on them too. I'll put them on my website. And also, if you're interested in going deeper in that, feel free to always come and join us at the Feminine Wisdom Way, because we go deep into that on the 3rd moon of every year. So we start that right after equinox this year. But that is that's a starting place for you. And as we go into these months and years ahead, a couple things we talked about. Number 1, from a practice perspective, keep those centers, body, mind, heart, and spirit, belly, solar plexus, heart, and the mind, attuned and clear. Remove interference from whatever is going to interfere with your capacity to really have your instincts and your intuition and your insight deeply tuned in. So you're not getting, buzzed all the time. So like really looking at the media you're taking in, looking at the things that you can do to really ground. Be tapped in to the invisible. Say, okay, like I want to understand more about the mystical, not understand it, but experience more of the mystical. And Bring this into your daily morning practice. If I going to say 3 things to you, like these are practices to bring in. 1, daily morning practice. Be breathing and tune in to your intuition. Feel it, sense it, play with it. Get an oracle deck and pull a card every day. Like that's a great way just to start. B, when you're making decisions or when things are tweaking you out, slow down and take a breath and take a beat and tune into those 4 channels, breathe into them. You even ask yourself, what is real here? And it's why we do our daily morning practice, so that it's easier to access when things go sideways and get wobbly. And C, put yourself in fields with other people who are operating at a high level. So whether that is one-on-one with what we call them wise being teas, or just high vibe feels where you can really regulate yourself and remember yourself. Those are 3 great practices to keep you tuned in to higher consciousness, to deeper awareness, and strengthen that connection to wisdom so that you can do what's called peacefully receive. Let's take that in for a moment as we complete here, to peacefully receive. And so just taking a moment and closing your eyes, perhaps putting one hand on that belly, and one hand on your heart. As you breathe into your belly, just tuning into your instinct. You breathe into your heart, just tuning in to your intuition, your heart knowing. As you breathe in to your third eye, just tuning into insight and that divine guidance. And if there was something in your life right now, question, challenge, just whatever's working you and you're working, just feeling yourself centered in that space, and that body knowing, the heart knowing, the higher mind knowing, the spirit knowing. Just what do I need to hear? What is the guidance, dear one, that wants to come to you right now? How we use those 4 eyes. What is the deeper guidance? What does your instinct say? What is your intuition, your feeling, your sense? What's the insight? Just dropping down from divine guidance. And what does your wise, neutral mind know? I did this myself today, and what I received was trust, engage, peacefully receive, let it unfold. Feel free to use it anytime as a meditation, and just keep those wise eyes watching, my friends, and play, open up with your intuition. We'll be back again for the next episode, and do share this with a friend. That's a great way to keep this all going for yourself. Share this with a friend. Talk about the different 6 channels. Take each other through the four eyes of a situation, and where you can talk about it and you can be that person for each other. Like, will you be my wise eyes friend? So we can wise eye watch together. And what are you seeing? What are you seeing? What are you knowing? What are you sensing? And then you can do it for each other. Where you just come together and you share and you witness, and then you say, okay, like, what's your intuition? What's your instinct? What's your insight? And you can do that for each other. So I double dog dare you to share this with a friend and invite a friend to be that with you. It could also be your partner, could be whoever you want that feels good in your heart and spirit. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Much love, everyone.